Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply. Let's make a very vintage, rustic, round purse. And in fact, the design on this, it's a little bit of a tribute. We'll talk more about that. Now, it's a project with a lot of steps, but none are difficult. And if you're new to leathercraft, dive in. You're going to be surprised at what you're capable of doing. And in fact, if we don't have a sewing machine, no issue. We're going to hand sew this, and it's a breeze. All right, so anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com, or check below. We've got links going to take you straight to the website. Also, if you want to know when our videos release, just click your notifications. You'll know exactly when these come out. So let's step over to our pattern table, get started. We've got digital pics of our pattern. We'll look at that shortly, but we're going to talk about what we're doing first off. It's going to help everything fall right into place. So for our main body, we're going to go with a 9-inch diameter. We're going to cut two, one for our face, one for our backing. On our gusset, we're going to overcut this, punch in our holes, trim to size. We'll talk more about that. Now we've got a cutout right here in the center, 3/4 inch by 8.5 inch. We're going to go with an 8-inch zipper. That's going to lay right in there. Now our little billets, we'll need to cut two of those. We've got a buckle side and a tongue side. Okay, so over to our digital pics. For our face and our backing, 9-inch diameter. On our gusset, 2.5 inches wide, 28 inches long, and then from our center line, we're going to measure out 6 1/4 either side. That's going to be our first hole for the billets. Then we'll come out an inch further on that. Okay, over to our strapping. For our tongue side, 48 inches by 3/4 inch. We've got our spread for our size holes on one end. On our buckle side, 19 inches, 3/4 inch wide. And then again, on our little billets, we'll cut two, 4-inch by 3/4 inch. Okay, so we got a feel for that. Now, let's step over to our main table, because how do we create a design like this? Actually, creating this, very easy. And punching these out, even easier. We could leave our round purse right where it is. Clean and simple, and it's going to look good, but I can't do that, right? So, we're going to add a decoration. This is what we're going to go with. This is reminiscent of one of the late 1800s Atlanta train stations. Had this design over the entrance. And in fact, we have a mall not far from us that in a tribute has that same design. Anyway, a couple of steps here, all very easy to do. Well, first off, how do we get a perfect round pattern? Easily done. Let's take our wing divider. This is the Osborne. This is the 10-inch. And I use this simply because the points are very sharp, but this will work with any one of our wing dividers. So let's say we want a 5-inch circle. Let's take half of that, 2.5 inch. That's our radius. I'm going to set my points at 2.5. Now on our pattern sheeting, what we can do is let's press one side in deep. And now let's just make a circle. Already I can see that starting to cut into the pattern sheeting. So we can take this, we can spin this maybe 8-10 times. That's going to separate out. Or what we can do, let's just work a small section at a time. That's already starting to separate. So we can get a perfect round pattern any dimension we want. And I just keep those in stock because we can use those again. All right, so over to our design. So 2 points here. First off, how do we get everything consistent on a circle? Easily done with a protractor and a wing divider. But secondly, we could freehand cut these. We don't have to, because what I've done, we should have both of these tools in our shop. It's the 57mm card slot punch, 1-inch round end punch. So I've taken my round end and I'm going to punch. Then with our slot, I'm going to punch there. That means we don't have to freehand this, but that's where the size, shape, and length of our design comes from. All right, so next step. On a round, how do we make sure all this is consistent? Let's do this. One of the great points of using the wing divider, we've got a center mark. Let's draw a line across that. Doesn't matter where it is. As long as it intersects that mark, we've got a center line, okay? So let's take a protractor. I've got my center mark and I've got my center line. So what we'll do, 180 degrees. We want to drop in 5 cuts. So let's divide 180, not by 5, but by 6, because that's our stop. That 6th number is our stop. So 180 divided by 6 is 30. So there's 30 degrees, 60, 90. It's as easy as that, okay? So our design, 2.5 inches long. So I'm going to come in 3/4 of an inch. What I'll do is I'll set my wing divider from our center point, scribe our line, okay? That's our outside. Now we're going to come down 2.5 inches. I'm going to scribe that line. Now, we could cut each one of these out. In fact, there's my original design. Well, we don't necessarily have to do that because we're using 2 tools. So all we need is our start mark and our stop mark. So for 5 of those, then right here we'll have a concho and our 3 spots. So the point here, the big point here, is make a design using tools that you have in your shop, and then it's easy enough to make sure that's consistent. All right, so enough of that. Let's reset here, cut some leather. For us crafters, I typically try to keep the cost of our projects reasonable. Now I say that because we're going to use 1 piece of leather for our face, back, gusset, billets, and strapping. So that piece of leather, first off, is going to have some good strength. But at the same time, I would like some body, but supple enough to bend when we sew this together. This is our Old West pull-up. This fits the bill perfectly. And in fact, this color is called Grizzly. Yeah, I like that. But to me, very traditional leather color. All right, so we're going to have to cut 2 of these, a face and a back. So I'm going to work this down. I'll scribe both in, but then let's cut this piece out. We're going to waste a little bit of leather, but basically we're trading leather for ease. We don't have to keep moving this big piece of leather around as we cut our circle. So let's scribe this in. We've got that. Okay, let's cut this piece out. Okay, we've got those 2. Let's move this out of our way. Now, new blade or sharp blade every time here, and let's just do our best to try to hit that line. But again, now we just have to turn this around and not a large piece of leather. And there we go. I think I actually split that line. Maybe just a little bit rough there. But in all honesty, these aren't going together. These are going to have a gusset between them. Good, we've got our 2 pieces. Now let's take this piece, step over to our punch table, mark and punch our cutouts. Well, I was really proud of my circle until I put my pattern down on it. Now it looks like it could have been cut a little bit better, but we're fine here. Now on my pattern, I've got 2 different colors of marks here. So where I mark in black, we're going to punch that hole. But where I mark in red, we're only going to mark that hole. That will keep us from making a mistake. So let's lay this in, and we're going to mark all of our holes. And I think we've got all of our marks there. Good. Now, to keep from being confused here, what we're going to do, so let's drop in our 1-inch round punch, and I'm going to do my best to get the 2 points as parallel as I can and center that on our mark. So that's our first step. Okay, good. Now, we can still see a little bit of that mark. Let's draw a line through that down to our center mark. Let's take, here we are. Now I'm going to lay that in right on that mark. Let's do the same thing on this side. There we are. Yeah, how easy is that? Okay, gonna do that 9 more times. Okay, our end punches are in. Now, one big point, we could freehand this. Absolutely, we can cut this, but a bigger point, look around your shop. See what tools you have that can make things like this very easy and very consistent. So now I'm going to do the same thing all the way around with our slot punch. And there we are. How easy is that? One of these could be a little bit better, but in all honesty, no one's going to see that but us. Last up here, we're going to put a concho right in the middle. So on that mark, let's go with a 3/16 inch round hole. Good, we've got that. We've got our marks for our spots. So let's go back to our main table. I'm going to try not to go on a roll here, but at Weaver, we've got so many beautiful colors that would look good with this. Well, just in the suedes, and we've got more than 20 colors. The turquoise would pop. The blue, always been one of my favorites. Purple, maybe purple and black. Any saddle tan, beige, rust, those would look good. But let's do this. Let's go with a more subdued look, more for a vintage feel. This is our red rock, the 3 to 4 ounce, and the color here is the dark teal. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Good distressed look, got a little bit of body to it. Very nice. So what we're going to do is we're going to scribe this. We're going to overcut our liner, glue it together, and then trim to size. So let's leave about a 1/2 inch all the way around. Yeah, I'm getting low on this. I love this leather and use it on all kinds of projects. But let's give it about a 1/2 inch there. So first off, with our wooden awl, let's scribe in the perimeter. Good. Okay, now, when we're scribing our cutouts, first off, I want to go light. But secondly, what I'm going to do is lean out a little bit. So when we lay this back together, that line somewhat falls under the face leather. Good, we've got that. So now we know where we want glue and where we don't want glue. So let's cut this piece out, leaving about a 1/2 inch all the way around. Okay, we've got that. Nice. Let's reset here, add some glue. One good point here, if we have a more complicated design, or maybe say less of a geometric design, what we can do is when we scribe this in, let's just make a mark on our face leather and our liner, so when this comes together, we know right where it's going to land. In our situation, we've only got 2 choices. So if that's upside down, well, it's not bad. But here's the problem. This band and this band, a little bit wider than the balance of them. So when I lay that in, I can see some of our scribed lines. Now the second point, we technically should sew around each of these points. But for us crafters, that's a lot of hand sewing. And in my opinion, here, not necessary. First off, we're going with the contact cement. But secondly, we've got some good body in both of our leathers. And if we at least get this glue close to the edge, it's going to be a nice bond. Okay, but let's start here because on this we've got a top grain. Let's go with a rougher. First off, right out here to our outside line. I don't want this to dog ear over time outside of our stitch line. So let's just rough that lightly around that line. And all we're really doing here is just breaking up that top grain so that glue can bite a little bit better. Now in our bands, we don't have to get right up to the edge, but let's at least break that top grain up down through the center. And there we are. We just want a good bond around our edges. So let's go with our S18 contact cement. Now we're going to need to add this to both sides. So let's start right here. Now I'm going to lay this on my edge. And really all I'm trying to do is avoid our cutouts. And again, we don't have to get right up to the edge, but let's see if we can get relatively close. Okay, let's set that aside. Over to our main body. And right here, on our outside, absolutely, let's go right to the edge. And there we go. Now, I'm going off my table because I want to get right to the edge on that. I'd prefer not to do that here because we'll get glue on that. We're going to run our project across it. That becomes a mess. But also, I want to make sure I lift my brush up so I don't run into the edge of the leather as we're adding glue. All right, let's just fill in from here. And it looks like we have good coverage. Okay, let's give these two pieces about 10 minutes. Let that glue set. Ample dry time here. What we're looking for with the contact cement. Looks dry, feels dry, but it's tacky. That's what we want. So let's lay this over. Now the one downside to contact cement is when we press this together, it's there. It's not coming apart. So let's just lightly lay this in. And I can see I'm upside down. So let's flip this around. Yeah, there we go. Now everything falls right into place. Let's lay that in. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and let's just press this out. Let's press around our cutouts. Okay, looks good thus far. Now we're going to trim the size. We've got to be careful here. What I'm going to do, first and foremost, new blade or sharp blade every time. And I'm going to press against the edge of our face leather and cut through our liner. There we go. Okay, good. We've got a clean cut. Now, could be a little bit better here and there. Handmade. This is not pushed out of a machine, but that looks good. All right, let's go drop in our spots. I would love to go with solid brass hardware. We've got the spots, the zipper, rivets, D's. The only thing we don't have is a good solid brass concho. We've got some, but they're slotted conchos. We'd need to do a bleed knot. Not what we're looking for here. So let's go with my favorite, all-time favorite, antique nickel. That will look good. So we've got 3 different spot sizes here. We're going to go in descending size. That's going to look good with this shape. But if we only have one size, still going to look sharp. Now with these, we're going to go with a 3/16 inch, 1/4 inch, and 5/16 inch. Now technically the smallest, that's considered pewter, but pretty close to our antique nickel. Now, the best way to set these, hands down, the Little Wonder. That's the best way to go. And it sets just about everything we carry. But if we don't have one, we can set these by hand. And it's 5 easy steps. So I'm going to do the first. On the outside marks, we're going to go with our 5/16 inch. So let's take our spot. And I'm going to bring those tines in just a little bit because typically they can be spread out a little bit. Let's bring those in a touch, and right on that mark, I'm going to straddle that, okay? I'm not sure if we can see that. Yeah, there we go. All right, so what I've got here is a small pallet made of cardboard because we're going to push our art knife through our leather. Now, the one thing I don't want is more slit than tine. So basically, I'm trying to mimic the size of that tine. So let's hit that mark. Good. Now let's flip this around, come through the other side, mainly because that's got such an angle to it. Open that up. Good. Okay, next step, let's take our spot. Let's force that through. Good. Just sinks right down flush. That means we've got good holes in this. So now let's flip this over. Let's be careful. We've got a sharp blade on one end, but I'm going to bend my tines inward. Good. Last step, let's take this, put it on our marble. Now, I don't want to hit this hard enough to ding the spot, but also let's be careful. We don't want to ding our leather, but that's all we need. So now when I flip this over, I can barely feel those tines. They're not going to snag or grab on anything. Okay, so the next one, I'll go with a 1/4 inch and then the 3/16 inch. And those 2 smallest spots, they barely get through, but they do. There we go. Okay, let's go at our concho. We should have waited to punch our hole because now we've added a liner. We need to repunch that. So again, 3/16 inch. Now, on our conchos, let's go with literally called a pinwheel concho. To me, very late 1800s, early 1900s. It's going to look good on this. We've got this in antique copper. Every time I put another finish next to this project, I want to change out the hardware and start over. But let's keep rolling. So on this, I'm going to take some of our fibings. That's just our leathercraft cement. We can go stronger, absolutely, but just a little white glue in there just to keep this from working loose. Let's drop that in, and with our screw, let's attach. And that feels secure. Well, that looks good, looking better and better. All right, let's go back to our main table, cut our gusset and our strapping. Another great thing about the Old West, this has enough body, we can use our wooden strap cutter. Now, we need a sharp blade in that, but this will cut nicely. So on our strapping, we need one at 48, one at 19, and then our little billets, we need 2 of those at 4 inches. So I'm going to cut out 2 straps, then we'll cut to size. We've got that, okay. Now let's cut to size. And 2 at 4 inches, okay, good. Now let's mark these with our awl. We've got everything marked. Now, all of our holes here are going to be for rivets. We'll go with a smaller hole, but right here for our size holes, let's go up to about the 4th hole on our revolving punch. Good. Now, for everything else, let's go up to about the 2nd, maybe the 3rd hole on our revolving punch. On this strap, on the buckle side, we're going to use a center bar buckle, but we're going to add 2 rivets just in case we need to add a keeper for a heel bar buckle. All right, these are ready to go to the punch table. Let's reset here, cut our gusset. Our gusset, 2.5 wide, 28 long. We could measure from the edge and mark, or we could use our wooden strap cutter. But in all honesty, the easiest thing for me is our straight edge, 2 inches exactly. So let's just measure over, 1/2 inch, double check there. Good. Okay, let's cut our gusset, 28 inches. We've got that piece cut and ready to go. All right, so on our pattern, right here, we're going to mark for our rivets. And then right here, let's scribe in our cutout for our zipper. We've got that. All right, last step here. These are going to be rivet holes. So let's go again with our 2nd or 3rd hole up. We've got that. Okay, let's step over to our punch table. Let's start with our billets. So 3/4 inch, we're going to go with a 3/4 inch round end. Now these are going to bend around. We'll have our D here, and those will connect with those 2 rivets. So we don't necessarily need a round end on this end, but we've got the tool, and it's a nice touch. Those are good. Okay, over to our buckle side, round end, both ends here. And now an oblong. So the rule of thumb in leather, 3/4 inch strap, 3/4 inch oblong. I'm going to go a little bit longer. I'm going to go with a 1 inch. We've got a little bit larger buckle. So let's sink that right there. Okay, that strap is good. Now over to the tongue side. On this end, we're going to go with a 3/4 inch English punch. round end on the other end. Good, we've got that. Okay, on our gusset, let's go with our round end. We've got a 3/4 inch cut there, so let's drop in our round end. And we'll cut between the two. All right, let's reset here, drop in some rivets. Let's start with our buckle side. We're going to go with a cart buckle, old school buckle. Technically, this is a sleek cart buckle, updated just a little bit, but it's got a good feel to it. It's a quality buckle. So let's load this. Now, with our rivets, I would prefer to go with a medium double cap or the 5/16 inch, but that's just going to be too much rivet for two 4-5s back to back. So let's go with our small double cap, technically the 1/4 inch. We're going to go with the antique nickel. And we're going to use our setter. This is from our 4-piece setter set. It's a great buy for us crafters. We can set all kinds of things. Okay, that looks good. Very nice. Now, on our gusset, let's take our billets. We've got a 3/4 inch antique nickel D-ring. So on this, we're going to rivet here, bring this around. So right here, we'll use a medium double cap, the 5/16, and then a small right here. And let's make sure that D is pointed towards the cutout for our zipper. Same thing other side. And there we go. Looks good. Very nice. Let's head back to our main table. Let's make the last two cuts for our zipper. So again, sharp blade, new blade every time. What I'm going to do is just cut. I can see the ends of my punch. So let's do our best just to cut between the two. Okay, we've got that. Good clean cut there. Now, we're going to add a zipper. We can absolutely hand sew this. And if we are, I'd say let's go with our diamond chisels. But to save time for the video, we're just going to sew this in with our Weaver 303. So let's go with some of our double-sided tape. And I believe this is one of the best products Weaver has ever brought in. Okay, we've got that. Very nice. Let's step over to my shop, drop in a stitch line. And I say this in every video where we use our 303. I love this machine. For us crafters, easy to maintain, easy to thread, very easy to sew with. So we're just going to knock in a stitch line around our zipper here. And I'm going to use the 92 thread in brown. Okay, we've got a good stitch line there. Nice. Let's step back over to my Weaver shop. We're going to hand sew this together. Again, for those of us without a machine, we're not going to let that stop us. But let's do this. First step here, we're going to prep to sew. So what I'd like is a mark center on our gusset so we know exactly what's up and down. And I'm going to use our marking pen. These are great. It's going to make a nice mark. We can easily see, but that'll rub right off. Now, over on our main body, same thing. We don't need a mark on our backing, no up or down there. But right here, again, let's mark top dead center. Good, we've got that. Okay. Let's step back over to our gusset. Now, let's scribe a line in for our chisel line. But what I'm going to do, for right here, I'd like my stitch line in about 1/8 of an inch, but we've also got a little height here. So I'm going to set this at 3/16 of an inch, and let's just scribe a line, both sides. Good, we've got that. Now, over on our main body, what I want to do is we've got 2 plies here. So I'm going to set this at 1/4 of an inch. Good. The reason we're doing that is because I want my edges to line up nicely. And there we are. Nice. Okay, let's reset here. We're going to tape our front and our back together to chisel. We're going to tape our face to our back, then we're going to chisel that. It's going to do 2 things. First off, we have exactly the same number of holes front and back. But also, with the chiseling, that cuts our chiseling by 1/3 because we're doing 2 for 1 here. Now, once we get this chiseled, we're going to count the holes. It sounds tedious. It isn't. You'll see what I'm talking about. But we're going to take that number, transfer that over to our gusset. The point there, every hole is going to line up. We know it is. There's no guesswork. So let's just tape these 2 together. And really here, we just need enough tape to hold them long enough to get a chisel in. Good, we've got that. Okay, let's tape these 2 together. Well, that looks good thus far. In fact, we've got a really nice meet all the way around. The only downside to that, these are not meeting. They're going on a gusset. But nonetheless, we're going to drop into chisel line, sew this. We're almost done here. So let's step over to our punch table, drop in our chisel lines. Now I mentioned we don't necessarily need a mark top dead center on our back side, but in all honesty, it wouldn't hurt. Simply because as we chisel around, if we need to stretch or contract our chisel line just to make sure everything's consistent, as we get back to our starting hole, well, it wouldn't hurt to have a mark on the back. So let's just mark that. And again, that mark's going to come right off. Okay, so we're going to go with our flat chisel. This is our 1/8 inch flat. It's my favorite chisel. Now we've got a 6. That's going to make up some good time. Unfortunately, it's very flat. We're going to see that as we move around. A 4, a little bit better, but still flat. But we're also going through 2 4-5s and a 3-4. So it's going to take a little more time. But let's go down to our 2-tine. Now we can speed this up a little bit. So I'm going to put a mark. I'm going to put my first tine on that center mark. And let's drive through. Now with the 2-tine, goes through very easy. But again, let's make sure we get the full width of that tine through our leather. That's going to make it easy when we hand sew. Now to pull this back out, just going to put my finger right there and work it out. Okay, next step, instead of just going one at a time, what we can do, first tine, last hole, and I'm going to mark that next chisel spot. There we go. Okay, that's going to speed it up just a little bit. But I'm going to work my way all the way around. As we come around to the end, for the folks that are relatively new to hand sewing, I was talking about stretching or contracting our stitch line. So now that I'm coming down to the end, what I can do is lay out my chisel, and I can see roughly where that next chisel hole is going to land. Actually, we're going to meet almost perfectly. But if we've got a little too wide of an area, we can always make our mark and then just scoot our chisel over a little bit. No one's going to see that little bit of a change. But if we've got a 1/4 inch stitch there, that's actually going to stand out. So that's what I was talking about. one more. Okay, good. Now let's do this. We're going to count our holes. Now again, sounds tedious. Actually, it isn't, because what we can do with our 6, there's 6, 12, 18, there's 24 holes. We just counted almost a quarter of this in less than 2 seconds. So it's not that bad. But what I would like to do, so let's take our single, and I'm just going to count, but I'm going to use our needles. And this is, yeah, we can't see it on that. There we go. So about every 20 holes, I'm just going to put a needle in just so I don't lose count. So let's do that. So starting right there, in fact, let's put a needle in that hole. There we go. Okay, we're counting that hole first. So there's 6. And there's 25. Let's go ahead and put a needle right there. We've got 112 holes, and that took no time at all to count that. Now, I just used the needles because I'm bad about losing my place. So let's take these out. We have 112 holes. So over here, we're actually going to put in 113 because we're going to bring this around, put in a small stitch on an overlap. So let's start here, right in the center. I'm going to drop in my chisel right there. Okay, we are not going to count that hole. So we need 56 holes on all 4 sides. And it's actually relatively easy because we're not counting that. I just dropped in 5. If we put first time last hole, there's 10. And there's 50, 55, and just one more. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing to the other 3 sides. $55 and one more gives us 56. Okay, now we're going to chisel across. So let's take our square. I'm going to chisel right across the center of those 2 last holes. So let's draw an ascribed line. Okay, now where's the middle of that line? 2.5, it's 1 1/4. Okay, so let's take our 4 tine. See if we can see this a little better. There we go. Let's take our 4 tine. I'm going to put my first tine centered on that mark. Good. Same on the other side. And there we are. I'm going to do the same thing on the other end. Very nice. We are ready to sew this together. Let's go back to our main table, trim our ends, then let's put a stitch in this. Let's come out about 1/8 of an inch beyond our chisel line. Let's trim both ends. Now, on our main body, let's separate this. And let's just take off the tape. And that is good tape. If we don't get every little bit off, that's okay, because our gusset's gonna sew over that. But one good point here, I keep a rag in my shop, lightly oiled with neat's foot oil. Whether the pure compound matters not. But what I typically do, I'll use this after I dye my project, just clean it off before I go to top coat. But an added benefit on our pull-up leathers, particularly where we've got some oil. Notice we've got a lighter area. That's our pull-up. But with this rag, and again, just oiled light enough. There we go. And there we are. Also, too, small scuffs with the oil in the leather and the rag. We typically can rub those right out. Okay, let's go sew this together. Let's start with a quick rundown of what we're using here. First off, our handy sewing pony, great for hand sewing. Good thing about this, we can clamp this in a number of different configurations on our work table. The point there, let's be comfortable when we're hand sewing. Now our needle and thread. My favorite needle, all time, John James number 18. It's a hand sewing needle, no sharp point. That's nice, but our holes, they're already punched. And our thread, this is our Rivets. We're going to go with a 0.8 millimeter and in brown. So, first step, let's sew our gusset together. Now, little help here. This is just a cheap clip from a craft store. I don't want a clip with a lot of strength to it, simply so it doesn't ding our leather. And we're just going to leave that there long enough to get a couple of stitches in, then we can drop that. So, basic saddler stitch. I've got a needle on both ends. So let's go through our first hole, one needle only. Let's pull that through. Good. Even out our distance. Nice. Second hole, needle from both sides. Very nice. Okay, second to the last hole. Now I'm down to my last hole. And again, it's hard to keep this from getting scuffed up while we're hand sewing. We can come back with our oily rag when we're done here. But for this, let's go from the face only, come through. Good. Now I'm just going to tie a square knot right there. And we've got a good knot, all right, with our knife. We rarely use this part of our blade, so it's always very sharp. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my knife blade on the thread, then pull the thread across the blade. That way I don't cut into thread or project. All right, let's attach our face to our gusset. Let's go with our center mark up. Now there are two ways to sew this. Well, first off, we could overlap. That's my preferred way to go, simply because of the outcome. But I will tell you this, that is tough. So only go that route if you have a lot of patience and a long weekend. But let's do this. Since we're going to butt this, I'm going to come through. There we are. That's our center hole. And then let's find this and come through there. Okay, good. Back to our cheap little clip. Let's just clip this. Again, once we get a couple of stitches in that, we can take that out and simply sew from there. Okay, so let's start on our center hole. Now there we don't necessarily need to. Our holes are going to line up, but there we are. Let's start there. Now, saddler stitch. So what we'll do is we're going to sew down to the bottom, tie our knot. That keeps us from having to use a lot of thread at one time. So, one needle through our first hole, even out the distance. All right, let's start to sew. And now we're down to our last two holes. Now, I talk about hand sewing being tedious. Actually, that wasn't bad. And we've got a nice meat on that. So, second to the last hole. Now, when we go through our last hole, I'm going to come through both plies here to the inside. And then both plies on our gusset. Good. Now, it's going to be hard to see. If I can find my needle. There we are. I'm just going to tie a square knot on the inside. Good, we've got that. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now I'm going to start in exactly the same hole we started in to sew that way. One needle through, even out our thread length. Good. And now let's sew around the other side. Now, as I get down towards the bottom, to me, it feels like this gusset is just going to be too short. Actually, it's not. We took the time to count our holes it's going to land perfectly. But another good point, my needles are moving easily through the leather because we got the full width of the tine through the hole. And down to our second to last hole. So again, we're going to do the same thing we did on this side. On this last hole, I'm going to come through the 2 plies on the face, bring my needle down to the inside, and on our gusset, I'm going to go through those last holes and bring that down to the inside. And there we go, that looks good thus far. Okay, the other side. Now on the back side, exactly the same thing. So let's find our center mark. And our center mark, let's bring our needle through there. Good, and then our little clip. Now, so what we'll do here, we'll, just like the front, we're going to sew down to the bottom. We'll tie our knot, but then let's sew from the bottom up. We can open our zipper, sit that down on our pony, but also when we tie our knot, we can get to it more easily here than we can down here. So let's start right in that hole, work our way down. Now when we get around to this point, we can sew down from here. It's a little bit awkward, but we've got enough body here and we've only got about 6 stitches left. We can bring this out of the pony, sit this in our lap if we need to. And we've got that okay. Let's hit this with our old rag. Then we drop in 2 rivets. We're done here. There are a couple of places through here I can see where I was more fishing for the hole, and I know better than that. But again, let's just take our oiled rag. Let's just clean that up a little bit. And it wouldn't hurt to hit our gusset either. Okay, good. Let's go drop in 2 rivets and we're done here. We're going to secure our straps with a simple double cap rivet. We could go with a segment snap or a line 24. So it wouldn't matter which side this is carried on, the buckle can always be up front. But for my wife, she's right hand, so right hand draw. Now there's 2 things we need to think about here. First off, so if she's going to carry this on the right side, this is going to be to the front. So this is going to get our buckle side. Now this too can be confusing because we need to come from the bottom. We're going to circle around, secure that with our rivet because now we're top grain out, buckle up. So let's go with a double cap rivet. Now these are the small again. And again, I would prefer the medium because it's a larger cap, larger base, but there's just not enough leather here for that. Good. Now, on the other side, we've got our tongue side, and again, we're going to come up from the bottom through our D. And one of the great things about the double cap rivets, we can snap the cap on without actually setting it. That's very nice. Very good. All right, I'm going to stuff some paper in this, fill it out a little bit. Let's get a better look. If we were going for a vintage rustic feel, I think we've got that on the nose. Handmade. This is neither store-bought nor machine-made. We've got a nice meat all the way around, both front and back. Love the color combination there. That antique nickel, very vintage. Nice project. What a great leathercraft project. Again, a lot of steps, but not one of them is difficult. Now on our decoration, you can go with this or create your own. We've seen it done. It's not difficult, but we've got a big empty canvas here. Make it your own. Have a great time designing, making your round purse. I bet it's going to be beautiful. Good luck with your projects.